Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 5. This is our last day of the Education USA East Asia and the Pacific virtual week and roadshow. And we're going to start with me telling you a little secret. What if there was an affordable way to study in the United States, to learn English, and it wasn't too difficult to get in? What if we had that little secret? But I guess the real secret is that it's not a secret. Thousands, tens of thousands of students study in these ways. So today we're going to talk about intensive English programs and community colleges. My name is Vincent Flores, and I'm the Regional Educational Advising Coordinator for Northeast Asia and the Pacific. And welcome to this session. And today, at the end of today's sessions, you should be able to make some informed choices about choosing English programs. Also make informed choices about choosing community colleges. So we'll give you some things to think about, and you should be able to start your research tonight. We can't cover everything, but we're going to cover a lot. So let's get started. So intensive English programs. Intensive English programs are very popular in the United States. You can study for a semester. You can study for a summer. You can study for a year and build up your skills. There are lots and lots of options. So you can build your skills and get experience. So obviously many of you or many of your students, many of the students you work with are learning English now. And maybe they're learning with native English speakers, but you can also build up you can get a cultural experience, you can build up other skills. There are many universities and colleges and English language institutes that have specialized English programs. They could be for STEM, they could be for business. So it's not just going to learn conversational English and meeting people, but there are specialized programs that focus on English as well. Lots of college students from across the world go to the United States on semester abroad or exchange programs. So you may be able to check if your university or college has an English program in the United States. And some students go to the United States to study English, not just to build skills, but specifically to build their skills and then transfer off to a degree program. So we have things called conditional admission, and we'll talk about these, and they come in different forms and different packages. But there are programs where you can study English, start to build your skills if you're not quite there yet, and then slowly start to get credited courses and work towards your degree. And a lot of students just go for fun. So why not go abroad? Studying abroad, studying in the United States, it can just be a lot of fun. So maybe you don't necessarily need to go for your major. Maybe you're not studying a major that requires English, but why not see part of the world? And why not see one of the many different programs and one of the different states, and take your time to see the United States? It's a big country and there's lots of fun to be had. So as I said, tens of thousands of students. So these are the most recent numbers that we have. So over 75,000 students are studied intensive English programs in the United States. And some of the big senders are right here in East Asia and the Pacific. So China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan are some of the biggest senders to these programs. And when we survey these students, we find that nearly half of the students want to stay in the United States to continue their education, usually towards a higher degree. So nearly half of the students that go to the United States want to go on and continue their studies, get a degree, and build their skills even more. So there's lots of opportunities. Now, when you choose an English program, there are things that you can think about. Number one, it could be cost. There are different institutions across the states. There are in big cities, there are in small towns, there are small language institutes, and there are institutes that are in very large institutions. Checking cost may be one thing that you think about. If you're a university student now, and you want to continue with credited courses, you should check if your university has a university partner in the United States. That's often the easiest way to go. It can be the cheapest way to go. It's not the only way to go, but you can check if your university has exchange programs, and that could be a very easy pathway. And if maybe you want to attend an institution that's not a university partner, then check with your university counselors and the international office and see if they will allow you to attend a different institution and still get the credits, because that can be very important to you. If you're looking around, you can look at location. Do you want to be in a warm climate? Do you want to be on an island like Hawaii? Or do you want to go in a time where maybe it's colder and you're experiencing some of the colder weather in the United States? Sometimes you can choose a program because it's close to places that you want to see, or it's easily accessible to airports and other things that you want to experience. So the environment can be important, and also check what kinds of experiences and opportunities they have. Most English language programs, intensive English language programs, are not just classes. Often they have other experiences. Sometimes they take you on hiking trips, they take you sightseeing, they take you shopping. So they really do take care of international students. So see what kinds of experiences they have, and also see what kinds of opportunities they have. They may have some homestay experiences. Again, they may have certain classes or certain programs that are meant to build up skills in a specific area like STEM or business. So these are all things that you can consider when you're looking at an intensive English program. And now on to community colleges. At Education USA, we love community colleges. So let's talk about that. So when we talk about community colleges, people ask how many are there, how many students are attending. So here are some numbers for you. The total number of international students as of the last statistics we have is over a million international students studying in the United States. And among those students, there are nearly 80,000 students studying at community colleges. So it's 7.4%, so it's quite a lot. It's actually a lot more because about 200,000 of the total students are doing something called OPT. So the number of students actually studying in classrooms, it's more than 7.4% actually. And again, we have top senders in East Asia and the Pacific, 5 of the top 10, and then 8 of the top 25 senders to community colleges are here in East Asia and the Pacific. So China, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, and all of these countries that are listed here are among the top senders. So really, you can go from anywhere to the United States to study English, or to study at a community college. One fun fact is that nearly half of the students in the United States studied at a community college or studied at a community college at one point in their academic career. So even older students within the last 10 years, about 50% of them have studied at a community college at some time. Community colleges often have a lower cost. So if cost is a factor, you can think about community colleges. And we'll have a slide later to talk about it. But if you think of community colleges as the first 2 years of your 4-year education, it can really reduce your costs. The success rates of community college students is very high. So community college students, for example, they have a very high rate of success in once they transfer to a 4-year institution. The very competitive schools these days that didn't really accept transfer students are now talking a lot about the success of community college students. So they graduate on time, they get high grades, and also community colleges really prepare you for success. So a lot of students think, why would I start 2 years at a community college when I can go for 4 years? Other than the cost, think about 2 years of really being prepared for success, where you can be helped, you can be nurtured, you can get a lot of attention. So community colleges are meant to build success, but they are they really do build students that do well in 4-year institutions. So with those smaller classes that are dedicated to your success, if you transfer, that can be great. But also remember, community colleges, you can build other skills. So if you're not going to go to a 4-year institution, and maybe you want to learn a skill or a trade, or you want to go directly into the workforce, we have programs for that too. One that I like to talk about is culinary arts. So if you would like to be a chef or learn to work in the food industry, I have visited community colleges in the United States, and I can honestly say, really completely honestly, two of the best meals I have ever had in my life were prepared by community college students that were trained by a professional chef in the training that I went to with Education USA advisors. So it was one of the finest meals I've actually ever had. So community colleges can build up your skills to work directly in the workforce, or if you want to transfer as well. So what are these transfer agreements? And sometimes they call them tags. So universities often have agreements with community colleges so that students can enter the community college and very seamlessly, very easily transfer for their third and fourth years. Some schools don't have the transfer agreements, but they often will accept community college students as transfer students. But if there is a transfer agreement, it is very, very easy. I can remember that one community college, if you entered in your first year and you told them, I want to go to this business school, all you had to do was maintain your grades, and and it was almost automatic. So it's kind of a really great secret in a way, but really tens of thousands of students do it. But in a way, it's a secret because not enough students know about these tag agreements. So some students say, but if I go to this community college and I transfer, is the diploma going to be different? And the answer is no. You get exactly the same diploma. It's not going to say you graduated from this university, but community college. No, on your diploma, when you graduate after your 4 years, it will be exactly the same diploma. So that's nothing to worry about. And again, four-year institutions love community colleges. They love students from community colleges, and they know that they're going to be very successful. So let's take a look at the paths to US degree. A lot of students know that you can go to a four-year institution, enter as a first year, and stay for 4 years. So you graduate from high school. And then one path is to go to a community college and get what's called an associate's degree. And that's usually a 2-year degree that helps you build skills and prepare you for the workforce. And then you can look for a job. So maybe you're learning to repair cars or learning some business administration skills, again, culinary arts and some other, there are many, many areas. Every area you can think of is represented at a community college. So you can get an associate's degree and try to get directly into the workforce. And the other pathway is to, after high school, enter what's called a 2+2 program. So you start at a community college, do your first 2 years, and often in America, we have the first 2 years are very similar. You're taking a variety of courses, learning to write, learning history and a variety of different things. We sometimes call it the general education courses. So you can do your general education and these required courses at community colleges, and then transfer to a four-year institution for your four-year bachelor's degree, and then go into the workforce or go on to get a master's degree or a PhD. So there are two paths here, and the 2+2 is again one of those little secrets that some students don't really think about. When you apply to a US college, if we're thinking of a four-year institution, this is usually what we think of. You have to send a transcript, you have to have your grades, and you have to consider your GPA. You often have to have an English proficiency test like the TOEFL, the IELTS, the Pearson test of English, Duolingo, or some of the other tests. You might need to take the SAT, the ACT. Sometimes you're required to take SAT subject tests. You might have to submit recommendations from your teacher, from your counselor, and others. You often have to do an essay or two, a personal statement or others, and you might have to submit other writing samples. And there can be more documents that you have to submit. But for a community college, there's a lot less. So you might have to submit an application form, or you have to submit an application form. You usually have to show that you graduated from high school, but just one thing to consider, there are some programs that allow for high school completion. Not every community college, it's not that common, but some schools do have high school completion programs. English tests, usually they don't require an English proficiency test because the idea is that you'll build up your skills. Some schools will take an English test, as to maybe you can get a higher English placement, but many schools will test you when you get to the campus. They'll give you a test and they'll see your English proficiency. So if your English proficiency is a little lower, then you might have to spend a little more time or take different types of classes. But I most community colleges will not require the SAT. The GPA, there's usually no required GPA. Again, the cost is very low and you don't have to submit recommendations. So this doesn't mean that they're not a good institution. It means that it's an institution that will accept you and prepare you for success. So if you are a student that's worried about all of those other aspects of the application process, maybe you don't have time to do the SAT because of your schedule, or maybe you decided kind of at the last minute that you wanted to study in the United States, a community college can be a great choice for you. So a few things to consider when you're thinking about a community college. One is the cost. Again, there's a variety of, there's many community colleges. There's well over 1,000, but think about the cost because that can be something that is important to you. Location, again, do you want to be in California or do you want to be in the East Coast or the West Coast? Do you want to be in a smaller town where you can be in a quieter environment, for example, or do you want to be in the big city? You should think about housing because there are some community colleges that don't have dormitories, or they may have homestays, and a lot of them these days do have dormitories. But do think about what kinds of housing options they have. That's something to think about at any institution you go to, whether you're getting a bachelor's, master's, or PhD, but do think about it for community colleges. And I would consider if a community college has a homestay option, that's something that can be fun if you're interested in that. Definitely look into transfer agreements. One of the big tips that we give students is that if you are interested in going to a certain four-year institution, ask them about community college transfers, because often they'll tell you, yes, we take a lot of students from these community colleges, and they won't necessarily recommend them, but they will tell you very frankly that certain schools are a little bit easier for the transfer, or they're very common. They commonly accept transfers. And again, think about the experiences you're going to have. Do they have opportunities for you to work on campus? Do they have opportunities for you to get some experience with companies, or to go on cultural excursions, go on trips, go hiking, and have all those other fun experiences? In some cases, if you play a sport, you might want to think about that, because there are sports leagues. Similar to what we think of as NCAA, there are community college sports leagues, and some students do enjoy playing sports while they're at community colleges. So before we move on to questions, I want to talk a little bit about my experiences at community colleges, or my experiences knowing about community colleges. Number one, I know many former community college students, some alumni, people who have gone to community colleges from their first few years, who are right now college professors, who have PhDs, who are working in fantastic jobs. A lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, and a lot of people I meet through Education USA have studied at community colleges themselves. Interestingly, a lot of my American friends studied at community college in high school, and often that is because they were advanced. They wanted to take higher math, or they wanted to take advanced courses, and it's at the community college that they could do that. So when you're thinking about the quality of education, a lot of gifted students in high school in America go to community colleges for extra experience. So that's something that I like to tell students, is that you can actually get advanced education at community college. Um, as an Education USA advisor, I visited many community colleges, and they're all different. Some of them have large communities and lots of students, and a lot of them are very small. But I think the one thing that I find in common with community colleges is care. I felt that students were well taken care of. The students that I talked to from Japan, Korea, or other countries all said that they really enjoyed their experience. They all felt taken care of. They felt that they were being supported for their success. and they really enjoyed the fact that they didn't have to spend as much money. And students that I have worked with as an advisor have gone on to schools for engineering. They've gone on to very competitive schools. And all of them said the first 2 years at the community college were really fun, that they felt supported, and that going to their institution, they didn't feel overwhelmed. They were able to use English with more confidence and more effectiveness, and they felt that they were ready for success at the four-year institution. So these are just a few things about intensive English programs and community colleges that we'll talk about, because the next two sessions are going to take a deeper dive and talk a lot more in detail about these two hidden secrets. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to see if we have any questions. And if we have any questions from the audience, let me know. I'll pull up the Q&A. And as we're waiting for questions, again, going through one of my experience, I do like to talk about that culinary experience when I was an EducationUSA advisor, where about 20 or 25 of us were sitting around a table in a community college. And I really felt that the students were really proud of what they had done. And the EducationUSA advisors were really impressed. They were very, very impressed by the food that they had made. And I had personally never had a finer meal in my life. We walked away very well fed. So again, the culinary arts experience, it's one of my warmest experience. And I also had the opportunity to meet students from different countries. We sort of had a fair and we moved around at tables. And all of the students, they would talk about their experiences at the community colleges, saying that, excuse me, saying that not only did they feel supported, but also that the professors and the teachers were giving them enough help that they felt really confident for the next steps. There's questions about financial aid and scholarships. Is there any financial aid or are there scholarships for international students attending community college? That can depend on the school. There are often merit scholarships. So sometimes when you have certain tests, you can get that can help you get scholarships. You really do have to ask the school. But with our experience in EducationUSA, we have heard that some institutions do have community colleges. Do have funding opportunities. But it is important to think that even if there aren't funding opportunities, community colleges can be very, very, very inexpensive compared to entering as a first year. I don't have numbers because the price of a four-year education can really vary, but it can be anywhere for a 1 year, half or a third or 2/3. So you really can save a lot of money. So that's one thing to think about. For professional college, question here, for professional college, how many years should you stay in that college normally? It depends on the program. A lot of associate's degrees are 2-year programs. Sometimes there are certain 3-year programs, generally 2 years, but again, it can depend on the program. And keep in mind that if you study at a community college, there are opportunities to stay longer in the United States if you want to advance your degree. You have to work with your offices and make sure you cover all of your visa documents and that sort of thing, but there are opportunities. There's a question here. Many students think that community college is easier than the IB/DP or A level. And what do you think? I think a lot of four-year institutions are easier than the IB diploma or the A levels. I don't think that there's anything necessarily low. I think the perception is that because it's cheaper, because it's 2 years, and because it's a kind of an easy way into a four-year institution, that somehow the quality is lower, because we sometimes think about that. If we don't pay a lot, maybe it's not as good. But I don't find that to be the case. I find that community colleges have a very high level of education. And if you're curious about it, if you're wondering about it, feel free to ask the community colleges. the international student representatives will be very frank and say, our students have gone on to these institutions, they have done this, they've gotten these jobs. So they can talk about the success rate of the students and what they've done. There's a question about doing a part-time job in community colleges. If you talk to your Education USA advisor or visit educationusa.state.gov, there is information about how you can work on campus as an international student. There is a limitation if you're on a student visa, but there are opportunities, yes. It won't be lots of work and lots of money, but you have opportunities to work on campus if you are a student in the United States. Question, does the community college require SAT or ACT? Usually the answer is no. I can't think of any, I don't want to say always no, but I can't think of any examples where the answer is yes. I believe they will take it into consideration if you have it, and perhaps that will help you with English language placement, but generally they do not require the SAT or ACT. There's a question here. Do community colleges help you to find housing if on-campus housing is not offered? That's a great question. And the answer is yes, that usually if there's no housing and if they're accepting international students, they will work with you to find housing. So if there's no housing at all, usually they may have partners with companies that provide homestays. They may have they may work with local providers of apartments or housing facilities, and they can recommend the ones that are reputable, that they know are safe. And another kind of tip that we can give students is if there is a community college that you want to go to that doesn't provide housing, always talk to the international office first, because they can give you the best tips and where to go. You can also check if there are alumni from your country, or ask if you can speak to students from your country to see if they have some tips as well. We've known some, for example, I live here in Korea. I've known Korean students to ask other Korean students to find the best housing options. There's a question here, due to the COVID situation, is the acceptance rate higher for 2021 intake? I don't have an answer to that, but I will say that the acceptance rates for community colleges are very, very high anyway. It is very, very easy to get accepted to community college. Again, that doesn't mean the quality is low. It just means that they're prepared to take students and give you the skills for success. So I don't have an answer about COVID, but I do know that the acceptance rate is high anyway. The question, how do we know which community college is recognized by the university? Is there a database? So community colleges or four-year institutions will tell you if they have transfer partners. Often you can find it on the website, but usually if you ask, they'll tell you what types of schools and also what programs they may have transfer agreements with. So yes, they should be very honest and transparent about whether they have the transfer agreements. But keep in mind that even if they don't have transfer agreements, there are still opportunities to transfer. Just like if you're transferring from a four-year institution to four-year institution, it's kind of the same thing if there's no transfer agreement. You're just reapplying as a transfer student. Do they have any graduate students for international students? If the question is, are there programs for graduate students? The answer is not necessarily for a degree, but graduate students can study at a community college to build skills. They may have programs in English, for example, or other special programs that the community college sets up for graduate students. So it really depends on what you want to do, but often if you're learning a skill or building up certain credentials, they do have those types of programs. And I'll just take one more question because I think we're about out of time here. But is 3.5 a good GPA for getting into a community college? Yes, actually, well, that's a very good GPA anyway. But community colleges often don't have a very sort of a cutoff point GPA. Some of them may have a minimum required GPA, but usually they will accept you even if your GPA is relatively low compared to competitive colleges. You can always ask and find information. And I guess I'll take one more question here. The question from Facebook Live. How does the transfer process work from a community college to four-year institution? I think we'll go through that more in the next session, so you can stay tuned. But I will say that once you get into the community college, you'll work with your counselor, work with your advisor, and tell them that you want to go to that four-year institution, and the pathway is set out. They'll tell you what courses you need to take, what grades you need to get. So it's a pretty seamless and pretty easy process. With that, we're out of time for this session. Please stay tuned for the next session coming up. We have sessions on intensive English programs and community colleges coming up soon. So thank you very much. And we'll be back shortly.